everybody, welcome back. I'm Jessica, Executive Director of Wild Cumberland.
And I'm Devin, a Wild Cumberland volunteer.
We appreciate you being here.
We start every single episode with the same reminder, and by the way, we're up to 12 episodes. Can you believe that?
That's
including
so
the special episodes that we have. But we start every podcast episode this way. Our monthly email newsletter is the very best way to stay up to date on issues affecting Cumberland Island and its wilderness. Subscribers get all the important information first. So if you haven't already, go to wildcumberland.org and get yourself signed up. In today's episode, we discuss the results of our Commitment to Cumberland fundraiser, our biggest fundraiser of the year. We discuss the Blake Plateau, some feral horse updates, and some pretty concerning observations from Jess's most recent visit to the Seashore. Wild Cumberland is staffed entirely by volunteers. We say that a lot, often in passing, but we want to make sure our listeners understand what that really means. Our team members donate their time, effort, and talents to help ensure that Cumberland Island and its wilderness remain protected. Every volunteer can find a place with us. We invite you to sign up to staff Wild Cumberland events, contribute to the organization's social media, assist in grant writing, and much more. Join us at wildcumberland.org and help make a difference for the next generation. We mentioned in our last episode that Cumberland Island National Seashore reported nearly 74,000 visitors last year. The highest volume of those visitors apparently occurred in March, April, and May, when there were approximately 30,000 visitors over just those 3 months. Can you believe that?
That's a lot of people.
And Jess, you just came back from the island.
I did.
Hopefully not 74,000 people on there.
It felt like it maybe at times. No, but I took my 3 littlest kids camping for almost a week, and it was a really busy time. But we'll get to that. So maybe let's start with some good news.
Yeah, let's do it. We are happy to report that we didn't just meet, but we exceeded our $5,000 fundraising goal in our virtual silent auction, something that we affectionately call Commitment to Cumberland. One of the primary reasons we host this auction virtually is so Cumberland Island lovers everywhere can participate. You don't have to be in the same room. Just hop online and you're there.
Well, you can be in any time zone. It doesn't matter where you are. You can still play. But I thought I was blown away that there were 100 bids placed, almost 100 bids placed over the 3 days.
Oh, yeah. And they started popping off fast.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everybody snuck in there in the last minute. I got a couple prizes stolen from me, but...
We sold every item. I am really happy to report.
Every item that we had, we exceeded our goal thanks to everyone that's listening here and a whole lot more. So we definitely appreciate you. We'll get to a little bit more of that here in a second. Those prizes in this year's auction included the 2024 Wild Cumberland Mystery Box.
This was good.
Yeah, for sure. That was a Yeti Tundra cooler. It was a 65 quart, I think. Yeah. It was a big cooler, let's just say that. And it was filled with a lot of good stuff.
We'll do like an official reveal for our July email newsletter.
For sure. Absolutely. There was a 3-night getaway from the Gilly on St. Simon's Island.
And they added like all these bonus items in there, like a bag that you could keep and toiletries to like really up the ante. Yeah.
Some souvenirs.
Yep.
I almost couldn't think of that word. But that one got taken away from me pretty fast. I bid it on that one, and less than 10 minutes went by, and I was already outbid. So thanks a lot, whoever won that.
There were virtual conversations, too, with some advocates and authors like Will Harlan and Sally Bethea. There was some really amazing art for people who love the island of all types, oil paintings, photography.
Oh, the painting of the dunes. Oh, so good. We bid on that one too. We bid on a lot of things, actually. We didn't win them all. Only won one item, but we had an autographed REM memorabilia, like a record collection.
Yeah.
This was exclusive to this event, and the REM crowd really came out and showed their support.
We're really honored and grateful for their support.
Of course, we can't go podcast without mentioning the Okefenokee.
No.
We're partners, I guess.
If you love Cumberland Island, you have to appreciate the Okefenokee.
Absolutely. We had an adventure from there. We had a spectacular guided hike in the North Carolina mountains with a guy named Tall.
Yep.
And remember that name, because here soon you will be listening to a special episode.
Oh, yeah. That was
Mr.
fun.
Tall from Snake Root.
And then there was like jewelry. There were gift baskets. There were the custom mugs that we have every year. There were so many good things.
I won the St. Mary River Keepers package.
So you're going to rock your hat,
I got
right?
the hat. I got the T-shirt. I got a book. I got the annual membership. So I'm all set.
Way to rep your river.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We really try hard to highlight independent artists and businesses where we can. So if you or somebody you know may be interested in contributing to our next auction, please let us know. We already had folks asking about when we're doing the next one.
Yes.
So maybe we don't have to wait a full year. But I really appreciate that people were interested in the items that we had to offer, and most importantly, interested in supporting the work that we do.
Okay, there were some quick updates in this newsletter that are pretty important, so I'm going to just run through those.
Okay.
First, the law that created the Camden County Spaceport Authority was repealed by Governor Kemp. Camden County commissioners appointed 5 members to this authority in 2022 after a referendum that prohibited commissioners from spending any more money to establish the spaceport. Yeah. So
they never actually met or made any decisions about the spaceport, but it has now officially at least been disbanded, if you will.
Right. For now. Right?
Yeah.
We'll see. Also, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources announced the closure of recreational and commercial oyster harvest season. That's effective June 1st through October 1st of this year.
And that shouldn't alarm anybody. That's a standard annual or seasonal closure. It helps keep us all safe by reducing the risk of illnesses that can happen during higher water temperatures.
Yes,
so
very routine.
they can make you really sick, and they're trying to keep us all safe. So yeah, but that's important for people who are recreating at the seashore this time of year to know.
Oh, yeah. The NPS says it has an up-to-date amphibian species checklist for almost 300 parks. We supplied a link to that data set in our email newsletter. I thought this was pretty interesting from the article. So the NPS covers around 3.5% of the nation's total area as far as like land goes, right? Guess what percentage of amphibians that they host on their lands? Just 3.5% of the land.
I would say over 50%.
65% of amphibian diversity in the U.S. is only in this 3.5% of lands.
It's pretty amazing.
It's wild.
They're responsible for a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Cape Hatteras National Seashore is also planning a draft management plan for their herd of horses on wait, hold on. I never say this right. Do it with me, Devin.
Ocracoke.
Ocracoke, thank you, Island. So this was done in partnership with Outer Banks Forever. Some researchers there, including a retired chief of biological resources for the Park Service, published something they called an information review of its herd. It sort of gives a history, if you will, an analysis of horses in North America, then on the East Coast and in the park. And then it kind of gives a summary of NPS laws and policies that are relevant to managing that horse population. So
not too different from something that hits home.
It was nice to see them doing that.
Yeah.
They were doing a preliminary public meeting in May, and then they'll have a formal public comment opportunity. So we'll keep everybody posted as we learn more about that and how it moves along.
Speaking of horses,
yes,
the lawsuit, the big lawsuit we've been talking about, right? Where the horses themselves are listed as plaintiffs continues to drag on.
Yep.
We linked to an article that's helpful to understand what's going on from our friends at The Current. It's a very good article about, kind of where this legal battle is kind of sitting in limbo right now. But, we'll see how that goes. Basically, the federal and state government are both claiming they're not responsible for these animals or the damages that they're causing.
So I'll say something here, Devin, which is that it's spring, and that means there are a lot of tourists on the seashore at this time of year.
Yeah, 30,000 from last year, just in 3 months,
there
right?
There are lots of baby animals, all different kinds of species, including, of course, foals. And there are lots, therefore, of photos and videos of the horses in particular being shared, right, on social media and in some of these really enormous Cumberland Island like Facebook groups that are out there. So there's been a lot of photo sharing and a lot of dialogue happening, as you would expect perhaps around this time of year. But given the legal action that is pending on this topic, I think, it's important to address those, at least for our organization, to say that, we are not scientists. We are not even equestrians. But if you look closely at these pictures, it's not really anything other than fact. There's a sort of a standard body condition chart that horse people use to evaluate the condition of a horse. It's a scale. It goes from like 1 to 9. 1 being the worst, 9 being really, really overweight.
Sure.
And I think a layperson can use that guide and compare it to what they see in person, maybe even online, to assess what they're seeing and understand better what these horses have to endure. Because, if you are not familiar with horses, it can be difficult to understand. And maybe I'll go into that more in a minute. But I think that reference about the body scale that came up in some of these discussions online is really helpful for people to better understand what's going on.
And with the legal battle kind of still ongoing, there's still no relief for these animals, and it's only going to get harder for them, right?
Yeah.
These abandoned animals are facing the hottest temperatures on record. The 10 warmest years on record have occurred in the last decade or so. These increasing temperatures will and are affecting everything and everyone on the island, including us.
Yeah, so they affect animals, they affect people. And we'll talk more about heat and safety maybe in a minute. I think, it's important to understand that Wild Cumberland has always sort of argued that the development and implementation of a wilderness management plan would address most, if not all, of the problems that plague this island and its management. And that has not been done in 40 years, more than 40 years. So for almost my entire lifetime, private interests, even the government, maybe you could argue itself, has been allowed to sort of use and manipulate the wilderness to accomplish whatever their agenda was, right? And it needs to stop. The horses are one symptom or one example of the problems and contradictions that this agency is dealing with. And you can find tons of media coverage and scholarly discussion on these topics.
I mean, clearly there's a lawsuit going on for a reason, right?
There's a lot of, but we support the horses and the groups that are dragging, to use that term again, the federal and state government into court. And we want to help people better understand the issue. So I think it's important that in our newsletter and in our podcast and in all of our social media channels that we're using an opportunity to dialogue and help people understand. This really is a humane treatment issue. When you visit the island once, maybe even a few times, there's so much to take in, right? There's so much majestic about Cumberland Island.
And someone who might visit the island once a year may not get that full picture, right?
Well, right. The horses may even seem like part of it all, of that majesty. But when you look more closely and you look more carefully or more regularly, even at the photos and videos you see online, you understand, I think, where these plaintiffs are coming from.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately when we know better, we do better. And so, for us as an organization, I think it's really important to clarify our position and that we do support this lawsuit as a means to ensure that the animals get the treatment they deserve, that the ecosystems remain protected, and that ultimately someone takes some degree of responsibility for the suffering that's happening there.
Yeah, and it's truly for the health of the horses. It's for the health of the ecosystem of the entire island. We just believe that it is the right thing to do and support. We also participated in a sign-on letter urging President Biden to conserve key areas on the Blake Plateau. This probably comes as no surprise if you're familiar with our values like we just talked about.
Yeah, this is a really important place for us to work together to protect. We've touched on the Blake Plateau a little bit before. It's an elongated, sort of flat expanse just off the continent, or just off the continental shelf along the southeast coast. It spans several states. It's really big. It's like almost 6.5 million acres, which is bigger than the state of Vermont, apparently.
Right.
I mean, and
just off the top of your head.
Right. But they found like 200 some odd species of deep sea corals. It's incredible. Pretty amazing. Yeah. And, it's something that we certainly support protecting.
It's the Blake Plateau. How did that get its name? Some guy named Blake was like, "This is mine."
My understanding is it actually is after a steamer ship because I guess there was one called the Blake that completed some expeditions along the coast, and they were doing this deep sea trawl that resulted in the discovery of these corals.
Yeah.
So they named it actually after a steamer ship.
There we go.
But I think it's important for people to understand when we talk about a location like the Blake Plateau that American companies can't mine on the high seas, right? And there's a reason for that, and that's because we never signed something that's like the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So it's like an international agreement on marine activities.
Sure.
So we didn't sign that. So what they did do was commission a study that would highlight areas in our own federal waters where that deep sea mining would be possible. And the Blake Plateau was identified as one of those potential sites. So I think taking action to ensure that our corridor and our region of the country remains protected and receives the benefits of a healthy marine ecosystem is critically important.
It's kind of like similar to the Okefenokee drilling and stuff.
Well,
somewhat.
deep sea mining, right? It's the oceanic version
Right.
of what
The
we are
the
more
bigger
familiar
version.
with on land.
Right.
And I think that people, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. People tend to not want to think about it or not want to understand it. But what happens in our ocean obviously impacts Cumberland Island and its wilderness and ultimately all of the ecosystems. So it is something to pay attention to. And I think it's really interesting to continue to see the science and the discoveries that are being made there.
Okay, there were two other things in this newsletter that I want to point out to our listeners. One was specific to Cumberland Island and its wilderness. It was a piece called Saving Wild Beauty from wilderness guide Brenda Wolf.
Hey, we were so grateful for her support and her perspective. That's a really well-written piece.
Yes, go check that out. Then there was this casual mention that the geographic range and complexity of zoonotic leprosy are increasing. What is going on?
Yeah. So this was kind of
Leprosy?
relevant and interesting because they had previously identified this disease was in places like Texas and Louisiana. But armadillos in the southeast appeared to be free of this infection. And apparently in the 8 southeast locations where this was not known to occur, they found infected armadillos at every location. And they showed 16% of them had evidence of infection. So it wasn't just 1 or 2. It was 16% of each population at these sites. So kind of interesting.
Keep an eye out for armadillos, right?
Well, I wouldn't go picking one up. But you
Right.
you shouldn't be harassing wildlife anyway, right?
Yeah, that's true. But you can read more about that in the link that we provided in the newsletter. And that leaves me to point out your most recent trip on the island, Jess. I want to hear all about this trip.
I'm kind of hesitant, actually. I was kind of hoping to speak with the new superintendent directly before I shared our family's experiences publicly. Fortunately, that hasn't happened. So
Was that
I do
bad?
think, yeah, it really was. And I do think this is the appropriate place to have some of these discussions and share some of these observations, because my hope is that we're reaching people who may not be as familiar with Cumberland Island as we are. And
again, this is all for the betterment of the island, its ecosystem, everything that lives there, everything that visits there. It's all up that alley.
Yeah. We had some problems when we first arrived. The orientation going over was clearly handled by a new employee. He wasn't even in a uniform, actually, yet. But it was a little inadequate, especially considering that while we were there, we experienced an cell service provider 911 outage. So if you're familiar with Park Service interpretation or instruction, when you go to the island, they tell you very explicitly, if you have an emergency, you use your phone to dial 911 and you tell them that you're on Cumberland Island and they will dispatch someone to you. And they even will go so far as to say, do not come looking for a ranger. You will not find one. Please call 911.
Especially won't find this guy that's undercover wearing
not in uniform.
Yeah.
But we were there for 6 days, and for at least 4, maybe 5 of the days that we were there, I received intermittent notification I needed to dial an alternate number to reach 911 in Camden County. And
How did you receive this?
So they were push notifications, I believe, from AT&T.
From the actual carrier?
From my carrier,
okay.
Is my understanding.
Yeah.
But you know how service is on the island. You get it here, you get it there, you get it 4 hours later. You might wait until tomorrow. You really don't know how timely the notifications you're receiving are. But to that point,
especially if you're deep in the wilderness, let alone sea camp, right? You know,
we
sea
were
camp
only at
barely
sea
gets
camp.
service.
But to that point, you know, nobody ever from the Park Service emailed me or notified me that 911 was not available. And to be there for 6 days in 100-degree temperatures with a really high heat index, you know, that's an unsafe practice. If they had simply posted notification at everywhere you get water.
I was about to say, like, there were no signs or anything?
No signs, nothing.
And at campsites, bathrooms?
No. So, you know, there was clearly a breakdown of communication, whether it happened from the carrier, from the 911 services, from the agency itself, down to the island and the people on the ground. But I think it's really critical that that system is in place.
It's connected.
And right? Working the way it should. So, you know, I think while we were there, we saw 4 health emergencies in one day.
Yeah.
I mean, this was, you know, not a good time for the Seashore to not have a reliable means for the public to reach emergency services or provide them with an alternate in the event that there is a problem. So I was really disappointed. And I think I was there alone with 3 kids and it was almost 100 degrees. I was uncomfortable knowing that the instruction I'd been given was no longer reliable or accurate. So I think that was, you know, is concerning to a lot of parents and individuals. But we had a lot of observations. I have to say that we were overrun with bikes, especially e-bikes.
Overrun?
Literally. I mean, like there were times my kids were actually clipped by bike users and tossed off the trail because users were not respecting the rules and going either both directions on trails that were meant for walking, or they were going at very high speeds.
With the e-bikes, yeah, speed is a huge concern with those.
So we had a lot of problems. We were really lucky nobody was injured. A lot of those lights were used, or a lot of those bikes were using really bright headlights at night. Which
during sea turtle nesting season.
So they should be red also, right? Like on the beach. But there were some things specific to resource management that we felt really took precedence. And it was difficult for my family to witness so much disturbance of nesting birds, some of which were threatened and endangered. We watched a very heavy piece of equipment drive up the beach at like 9:30 in the morning, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning during sea turtle nesting season and bird nesting season.
Right.
Instead of going up the main road. So we saw people learning to dock their boat while there were baby manatees present, like within the immediate vicinity. We watched fishermen cast immediately adjacent to these baby manatees. And there was not any management happening on behalf of the Park Service. So there were a lot of problems. And I have to tell you, I mean, I've been going there for almost over 30 years. My kids have been going their entire lives, and they left and were like, can we find any place to go vacation? And that was kind of heartbreaking to me. Yeah. That their experience in this place has changed so drastically in just their short lives, right?
Right.
So I'm hopeful that under new management and with a little more care, some of those issues and things will be addressed. But I share this so that people can, one, manage their expectations accordingly, but also to help educate people about, you know, what the experience is like for those of us who are not on e-bikes, those of us who are really seeking a more primitive, a more solitary, a quieter experience. And that
it's for a reason, right?
There really does have to be space for us all, and there should be. So we tried walking up the main road one night, and there was a group of hogs that was so aggressive that we didn't feel comfortable continuing in the dark. The campsites were surrounded by trash, and I'm really disappointed because some of these were like big pieces of trash, Ziploc containers or foil.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And then a lot of it though was micro trash.
Micro trash is huge in those campsites,
zippers,
right?
And twist ties and tiny pieces of foil and plastic tabs. And I mean, we could have spent 3 or 4 days of our vacation just picking up trash from our site.
So do you think anyone's checking the sites?
The volunteers do, but there's only so much they're capable of doing.
Right.
I mean, if the users are being irresponsible and there's not enough park staff or volunteers, it's really adding up. So I would like to reiterate or make sure one thing is clear, that when we have this discussion about public safety and we have discussions about how visitors are behaving and impacts to the island, we are not advocating for an additional or heavier law enforcement presence ever. We are always advocating for proper interpretation and information so that visitors can make informed and responsible choices. I think there's a really important clarification to make there, and I want to make sure our listeners don't have any questions about that. And I wonder, and this, I'll leave this here, I wonder if this had something to do with our interaction with a species that I have never seen before on Cumberland Island.
In your 30 plus years of going?
Right. Even though I've seen evidence there, I have never seen this species until this trip. And I have to wonder if the trash and some of the poor leave no trace philosophy and, contributed to that. So I'm going to wait and discuss that experience, that species and its potential implications in an episode where we have the right experts and a little bit more time.
Fair enough.
I want to be intentional about how we approach that conversation, but I do think people have to be mindful that, there's somebody immediately coming into these campsites behind you to use them as their home for a period of time. And we have a responsibility to leave a place as clean as we found it, if not better, always.
I'm always bringing an extra trash bag to pick up, other people's stuff. And sometimes it happens by accident, right?
Sure.
You're leaving, you're in a hurry. Maybe you got your hands full with kids
We've
or something like that.
We've talked about this before, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've lost things out there. You lose trash even, or you forget some things out. But this has reached a level that's really impacting, obviously, the native ecology and the visitor experience in a really detrimental way. And so it's, unfortunate. I wish I had better news to report. I wish it had been a more positive experience from a visitor experience perspective.
Well, again, we bring this up for a reason. Right. And we're not just complainers. We're all about making the island better and, helping the ecosystem and the wilderness thrive, right? Yeah. And this all builds up against that. So I appreciate you choosing to share that with us. You definitely didn't have to. You could have kept it private to yourself.
I wish that were all of our experiences, but that's what I feel most comfortable sharing at this point. And I think I'd be curious to know what other experiences have been like this spring if you've been visiting, whether you're in the more developed campsites or you're in wilderness. I'd like to know at this busy time of year, did you have an experience comparable to mine where you run off trails by bikes? Were you, watching people run at shorebirds that were trying to protect their nests? I mean, did you try to call 911 and not get through? I mean, these are the burning questions I have. So that voicemail feature we have on our website, that's where people should do that. They can call, they can talk to us. You can even call yourself a different name. We're really not going to know. You can say you're Joe, Bob, or Shirley, and I really won't know.
I'm anonymous, exactly. Whatever you want to say.
So go to the website, use that feature, and tell us what you think, and tell us what your experiences are like.
And you mentioned the hogs in this story, right? Well, I got some decent news.
Okay.
We want to make sure we point out the 2024-2025 managed hunt dates have been released.
Oh, yeah,
for
that's
those
kind
hogs,
of a big deal.
Right? Yeah. So registration for Cumberland Island hunts opens July 1st at pay.gov. You can search Cumberland Island managed hunt, and it's the first one.
Yeah, first come, first serve.
First come, first serve. Make sure to snag your spot. So mark your calendars for July 1st. You can register for as many as you want. DNR hunting regulations do apply.
Yep. Those happen in October, the 1st through the 3rd, November, December twice, and January twice. So, of course, the wilderness campsites are closed to visitors during those times.
Yes.
You'll see them marked now as unavailable on recreation.gov, so that's an improvement. You can't mistakenly book a campsite during a wilderness closure. But it's, not just camping, obviously, that's restricted. The entire northern end of the island is kind of shut down, right? Yeah. Like you can't go up the main road. You can't go through the hike those trails. So it's not just the campsites. And I think it's important for people to remember when they plan their trips. Yeah.
So definitely keep that in mind for your upcoming visits. We urge our supporters to help document and report what they experience on their visits, both good and bad, such as Jess. You report the good things too. You just had a pretty bad experience this time. So we want to hear all of that. There's a form on our website to do just that. Of course, you can also leave it on the voicemail that we just talked about. And while you're on the website, you can download our free Wild Cumberland Kids Activity Pack and pick up a t-shirt before your next trip. We got a little shop on there.
Yep. We know how valuable your time is, so thanks for choosing to spend some of it with us today. Let us know what you think and stay wild. Wild Cumberland is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and all donations are tax deductible. Learn more and take action at wildcumberland.org.
The Wild Cumberland Podcast is produced by Vertical River, and this episode was edited by Greg Cuson.